On November 2nd, 1977, 4 people went to work in Wilkes Barre, Pennsylvania. By 3:47 that afternoon, all 4 were dead. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't random violence. A coworker killed them over a financial dispute that had been escalating for months. The weapon was a handgun. The location was their shared workplace. The perpetrator surrendered to police less than an hour later. This case reveals something crucial about workplace violence that we still struggle with today. The warning signs were there. The opportunity for intervention existed. But in 1977, the systems designed to prevent such tragedies simply didn't exist. What you're about to hear is based entirely on court records, police reports, and investigative journalism. No dramatizations, no speculations, just facts, and the uncomfortable questions they raise about how we handle conflict in American workplaces. This is the story of how a financial disagreement became a multiple homicide, and what we've learned in the 47 years since. November 2nd, 1977. A Wednesday afternoon in Wilkes Barre, Pennsylvania, a city of 58,000 in northeastern Pennsylvania's Wyoming Valley. The temperature hovered near 52 degrees. Light rain had fallen that morning. At 3:47 p.m., the Wilkes Barre Police Department received a 911 call from 142 South Main Street. The caller, an employee from a neighboring office, reported hearing what sounded like gunshots. Officers arrived at 5:52 p.m., 5 minutes after the initial call. What they found was a small accounting office on the second floor. 4 victims, all employees of the same firm, all shot at close range. The perpetrator, a 41-year-old accountant named James Harrison, was still at the scene. According to police reports filed that evening, Harrison made no attempt to flee. When officers entered, he was seated at his desk, the weapon placed on the surface in front of him. His first words to police, according to the arrest report, "I had to do it. They wouldn't listen." The victims ranged in age from 28 to 56, 3 men, 1 woman. All had worked at the firm for between 3 and 12 years. By 4:15 p.m., all 4 were pronounced dead at the scene by the county coroner. Detective Robert Mitchell, who led the initial investigation, would later testify that he immediately recognized this as a workplace-related. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The perpetrator was known to all victims. This was about something internal.
The Wilkes Barre Police Department, in coordination with the Luzerne County District Attorney's Office, began reconstructing the timeline immediately. What emerged over the following weeks was a pattern investigators would see repeatedly in workplace violence cases for decades to come. According to witness statements collected November 2nd through 4th, tensions at the accounting firm had been escalating since July, 4 months earlier. The source? A financial dispute involving commission payments and client billing. Employees in adjacent offices reported hearing raised voices from the accounting firm on multiple occasions in the weeks before the incident. One witness, whose statement was entered as evidence, recalled hearing Harrison say, "You people are stealing from me," during an argument in mid-October. But no formal complaint had been filed, no outside mediator brought in, no intervention attempted. In 1977, most small businesses in America operated with minimal regulation and virtually no employee protection systems. If you had a workplace dispute, you either handled it yourself, quit, or hoped management would intervene. There was no formal process. The accounting firm had no written conflict resolution policy, no employee handbook outlining grievance procedures. When disputes arose, they were handled informally by management, if they were handled at all. In retrospect, Chen continues, we can see how the structure itself created risk. You had financial pressure from a declining regional economy, hierarchical workplace relationships with clear power imbalances, and zero formal mechanisms for addressing conflict. Add a triggering financial dispute, and you have the preconditions for violence.
So how does a $3,800 commission dispute escalate to 4 homicides? The answer lies not in individual pathology, but in systemic failure. Over the next 15 minutes, we'll examine the evidence that investigators, prosecutors, and workplace violence researchers have studied for nearly 4 decades. We'll look at the specific timeline of the financial dispute, how it began, how it escalated, and where intervention could have occurred. We'll examine Harrison's background and the warning signs that colleagues noticed but didn't report. We'll explore the economic and social pressures of 1977 that created an environment where workplace tensions had nowhere to go. And we'll ask the question that defines this case: could this have been prevented? According to company records entered as evidence during the trial, the dispute began in July 1977 when the firm's managing partners restructured their commission policy. Previous policy, in place since 1974, staff accountants received 15% commission on new clients they brought to the firm, plus 5% on any additional services those clients purchased. New policy, implemented July 1, 1977, commission reduced to 10% on new clients with no residual percentage on additional services. Harrison's personnel file, subpoenaed by prosecutors, showed he had earned $2,847 in commissions during the first 6 months of 1977. Under the new policy, that same work would have generated approximately $1,900, a 33% reduction. The firm held a meeting on June 28th to announce the change. According to meeting minutes entered as evidence, Harrison objected, stating the change was retroactive punishment for his success in bringing in new business. The managing partners, according to those same minutes, indicated the decision was final and based on firm-wide economic pressures. Harrison's first written complaint came July 15th, 2 weeks after the policy took effect. In a memo to the managing partners, he argued that 3 specific clients should fall under the old commission structure because he had initiated contact before July 1st, even though contracts weren't signed until afterwards. The partners denied this request on July 22nd. Their response memo stated, "Commission policy is determined by contract signature date. This is not negotiable." For the next 3 months, according to testimony from surviving employees, Harrison repeatedly raised the issue. In August, he calculated that he was owed $3,800 under what he considered the correct interpretation of when client relationships began. By September, other employees were noticing changes in Harrison's behavior. One coworker testified that Harrison had become withdrawn and fixated on the commission issue, bringing it up almost daily. In October, Harrison submitted a formal written request for arbitration of the dispute. The firm had no arbitration process. The managing partners responded that their decision was final. October 28th, 5 days before the incident, Harrison sent a final memo stating, "You are stealing from me and you know it. This is not over."
James Harrison was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1936. He served in the U.S. Army from 1954 to 1956, receiving an honorable discharge. He earned his accounting degree from Wilkes College in 1962. Harrison joined the firm in 1970. His personnel file, reviewed by court-appointed psychologists, showed consistent performance reviews ranging from satisfactory to above average for his first 6 years. No disciplinary actions, no previous workplace conflicts documented. He was married with 2 children. His wife worked as a teacher. According to financial records entered during trial, the family had no unusual debt. They owned their home. Harrison's salary was $18,500 annually, solid middle-class income for the region. Dr. Kenneth Wright, a forensic psychologist who evaluated Harrison after his arrest, testified that Harrison showed no signs of psychotic disorder or severe mental illness. What we saw, Wright explained in his court testimony, was someone under significant financial and psychological stress who became fixated on a perceived injustice. The economic context matters here. In 1977, inflation was running at 6.5%. The purchasing power of middle-class salaries was eroding. A 33% reduction in expected commission income in that environment represented real financial pressure. But Wright emphasized something crucial. Economic stress affects millions of workers. The vast majority never become violent. What distinguished this case was the complete absence of intervention mechanisms. Harrison's fixation grew in isolation with no outlet and no resolution. Harrison had no history of violence, no criminal record, no documented substance abuse. Coworkers described him as quiet and professional until the summer of 1977. The warning signs that did exist were behavioral, not criminal. Starting in August, according to witness testimony, Harrison began arriving at work earlier and staying later. He ate lunch alone. He stopped participating in casual office conversation. One coworker recalled Harrison saying in September, "They think they can just take what's mine." Another remembered him stating in October, "I've tried every legitimate channel. There's nothing left." In hindsight, these statements constitute clear warning signs, expressions of grievance, perception of injustice, statements about exhausting options. But in 1977, most workers wouldn't have recognized these as red flags requiring intervention. Dr. Stephen Albrecht, a workplace violence prevention specialist who has studied this case, identifies 5 critical warning signs that were present but not acted upon. First, escalating verbal expressions of grievance. Harrison repeatedly stated he was being treated unfairly, Albrecht explains. In modern threat assessment, we look for this pattern: grievance that becomes more frequent and more intense over time. Second, fixation on a perceived injustice. Harrison couldn't move past the commission dispute, Albrecht notes. This fixation, lasting months, is a major indicator of potential violence risk. Third, statements about exhausting legitimate channels. When someone says they've tried everything and implies that normal processes have failed them, that's a critical escalation point, Albrecht says. It suggests they may be considering alternatives outside normal boundaries. Fourth, social isolation at work. Withdrawing from colleagues, eating alone, avoiding casual interaction. These behavioral changes signal increasing psychological distress, according to Albrecht. Fifth, direct statements suggesting potential action. Harrison's October 28th memo, "This is not over,"
constituted what Albrecht calls a veiled threat statement that should have triggered immediate intervention. But here's what makes this case historically significant. In 1977, virtually no one was trained to recognize these warning signs. Workplace violence research was in its infancy. Threat assessment protocols didn't exist. Even if someone had noticed all 5 signs, there was no clear process for reporting concerns or initiating intervention. The firm had no employee assistance program, no HR department, no access to workplace counseling. Even if a coworker wanted to help, there was no system in place to facilitate that help.
The institutional failures were comprehensive. No formal conflict resolution process meant the dispute couldn't be escalated to neutral third-party mediation. No regular management check-ins meant supervisors weren't monitoring employee well-being. No reporting mechanism meant concerned coworkers had nowhere to voice observations. Jennifer Walsh, an HR professional who has studied workplace violence prevention, puts it bluntly. This case represents everything we now know not to do. Every warning sign was missed because the systems to catch them didn't exist. Every opportunity for intervention was lost because the process for intervention hadn't been developed. The Lucerne County District Attorney charged Harrison with 4 counts of first-degree murder on November 4, 1977. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Premeditation was evident in Harrison's preparation, in his bringing a weapon to work, in his targeting of specific individuals involved in the commission dispute. Lead prosecutor David Klein argued that Harrison had planned the attack for at least several days. Evidence included Harrison's purchase of the handgun on October 26, 6 days before the incident, and testimony that he had test-fired it at a shooting range on October 30th. The defense, led by attorney Michael Brennan, did not dispute the facts of what occurred. Instead, Brennan argued for reduced charges based on Harrison's psychological state, presenting evidence of the prolonged financial dispute and its impact on Harrison's mental health. Dr. Wright's evaluation became central to the defense strategy. While Wright testified that Harrison showed no signs of legal insanity, he did describe prolonged situational stress leading to crisis decision-making. The defense argued this constituted extreme emotional disturbance that should reduce the charges to manslaughter. The trial lasted 3 weeks in March 1978. Prosecutors presented testimony from 18 witnesses, including surviving employees, police investigators, and forensic experts. The defense called 6 witnesses, primarily focusing on Harrison's previously stable history and the severity of the workplace dispute. On March 24, 1978, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned verdicts of guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder. The jury rejected the diminished capacity argument, determining that Harrison's planning demonstrated clear premeditation. During sentencing on April 7, 1978, Judge Thomas Harrigan acknowledged the tragic circumstances surrounding the case, but emphasized that financial disputes, however severe, can never justify taking human life. Harrison received 4 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Harrison's only statement during sentencing: "I'm sorry for what I did." But they wouldn't listen. They just wouldn't listen. To fully understand this case, we need to understand America in the mid-1970s, particularly the economic and workplace pressures that created conditions where conflicts could escalate without check. The national economy was struggling. The 1973 oil crisis had triggered a recession. Inflation was eroding middle-class purchasing power. In Pennsylvania's coal regions, traditional industries were in terminal decline. Unemployment was high. Economic anxiety was pervasive.
Dr. Chen, the labor historian, explains the 1970s represented a transition point in American workplace culture. The post-war industrial model, stable employment, clear hierarchies, informal conflict resolution was breaking down. But the modern HR infrastructure we take for granted today hadn't yet developed. Workplace relations in 1977 were markedly different from today. Most small businesses operated with minimal employment law compliance. The Occupational Safety and Health Act was only 7 years old. Title VII employment discrimination enforcement was still evolving. The concept of workplace violence prevention didn't exist. If you had a problem with your employer, Chen notes, your options were limited. You could quit, but in a high unemployment economy, that meant risking your family's financial security. You could complain, but in a hierarchical workplace culture, that often meant retaliation. Or you could try to handle it yourself. Mental health support was particularly limited. The stigma around psychological counseling was intense, especially for men in professional environments. Employee assistance programs were rare. The idea that employers had any responsibility for worker mental health was novel. Harrison was dealing with financial stress, workplace conflict, and psychological pressure with essentially no support system. He couldn't talk to HR, there was no HR. He couldn't seek employee counseling, it didn't exist. He couldn't report his concerns, there was no process. He was isolated with his grievance, and it festered. The Vietnam War had ended just 2 years earlier. Many men of Harrison's generation had military experience, but limited tools for processing stress or conflict. The cultural expectation was to handle things yourself, to be tough, to not seek help, to solve problems through direct action. We're not excusing what Harrison did, Chen emphasizes, but understanding the environmental pressures helps explain how someone with no prior history of violence could reach a breaking point. In a modern workplace with proper support systems, this likely never would have escalated to violence.
James Harrison is currently incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution at Graterford, Pennsylvania. He is 88 years old. He has been denied parole at every hearing, 8 times since becoming eligible in 1998. According to prison records, Harrison has been a model inmate with no disciplinary infractions. He completed a college degree through a prison education program. He has participated in violence prevention counseling and has met with victims' family members who chose to participate in restorative justice dialogue with Harrison. In a 2015 parole hearing, Harrison stated, "I destroyed 5 families, the 4 I killed and my own. I took fathers, brothers, colleagues. I created wounds that will never heal. I think about those 4 people every day. What I did was monstrous, and no amount of regret can undo it." The families of the victims have pursued different paths. 2 families participated in victim impact statements at parole hearings, consistently arguing against release. 1 family declined to participate in any proceedings after the initial trial. 1 family, after years of processing, participated in restorative justice dialogue with Harrison in 2010. The accounting firm closed permanently in 1979, 2 years after the incident. The building at 142 South Main Street was demolished in 1985. The site is now a parking lot. The Wilkes Barre case contributed to growing awareness of workplace violence in the late 1970s and early 1980s. While it wasn't the first workplace shooting in America, it became a case study in understanding escalation patterns and systemic failures. The case is cited in foundational workplace violence research, including studies published by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in the 1990s.
Specific elements, the financial dispute origin, the extended timeline of escalation, the multiple warning signs, these all became touchstones for developing threat assessment protocols. Dr. Ulbrecht notes, cases like Wilkes Barre taught us that workplace violence is rarely sudden. There's almost always a pattern, a timeline, warning signs. The question is whether organizational systems exist to detect and respond to those signs. Several workplace violence prevention protocols developed in the 1980s and 1990s explicitly reference the patterns visible in this case. The emphasis on early conflict resolution, on recognizing behavioral warning signs, on providing employee support systems, these all emerged from analysis of cases where such systems were absent.
Since 1977, workplace violence research has identified clear, evidence-based prevention strategies. The question is no longer whether workplace violence can be prevented. It's whether organizations implement known effective practices. The foundation of modern prevention is early conflict resolution. Financial disputes should never be allowed to fester for months, Walsh, the HR professional, explains. Modern best practice requires immediate escalation to trained mediators when initial attempts at resolution fail. Second is behavioral threat assessment. Organizations train managers and employees to recognize warning signs, fixation on grievance, statements about justice or revenge, social isolation, acquisition of weapons, statements about exhausting legitimate options. The signs Harrison displayed are now part of standard training, Albrecht notes. We teach people to recognize these patterns and to report concerns through established channels. Third is robust employee support. Employee assistance programs provide confidential counseling for workers dealing with financial stress, workplace conflict, or psychological pressure. The idea is intervention before crisis, Walsh explains. Give people tools to process stress before it escalates. Fourth is anonymous reporting mechanisms. Many organizations now provide hotlines or online systems where employees can report concerning behavior without fear of retaliation. Coworkers often see warning signs before management does, but they need a safe way to report. Fifth is access to conflict resolution resources. Modern workplaces increasingly employ trained mediators, maintain clear grievance procedures, and provide multiple escalation paths for disputes. The statistical impact of these measures is clear. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, workplace homicides have declined by 52% since 1994, even as the workforce has grown. Comprehensive workplace violence prevention programs, when properly implemented, reduce incidents by 50 to 70%. But implementation remains inconsistent. Small businesses especially still operate without proper protocols, Walsh notes. They think it won't happen to them until it does. 4 people went to work on November 2, 1977. None came home. A financial dispute over $3,800 ended in 4 murders and a life sentence. What makes this case significant isn't its brutality. It's what it revealed about the systemic failures in how we handled workplace conflict. No HR department to mediate disputes. No employee assistance program to support someone under stress. No threat assessment protocol to recognize warning signs. No reporting mechanism for concerned coworkers.
James Harrison destroyed 5 families. 4 through violence, his own through consequence. The victims left behind parents, spouses, children, siblings, who have carried that loss for 47 years. But from tragedy came knowledge. The patterns visible in Wilkes Barre helped develop the prevention frameworks that exist today. Every early intervention protocol, every employee assistance program, every threat assessment training, these emerged from understanding cases where such systems were absent. Today, we have the tools. HR departments trained in conflict resolution, behavioral threat assessment protocols, employee assistance programs, anonymous reporting mechanisms. Workplace violence prevention is no longer theoretical. It's evidence-based practice. But tools only work when organizations use them, when employees feel safe reporting concerns, when management takes early warning signs seriously, when support systems exist before crisis occurs. If you manage people, know the warning signs. If you're experiencing workplace conflict, seek help early. If you see concerning behavior, report it. The difference between tragedy and resolution often comes down to whether someone acts before crisis becomes catastrophe. The Wilkes Barre case reminds us that workplace violence is preventable, but prevention requires awareness, resources, and the willingness to act. 4 lives ended on November 2nd, 1977. Hundreds more have been saved since by the lessons we learned from their deaths.